We looked at the Super games for the Super Nintendo, as well as the NES and the Game Boy. These are just the video games that start with the word Super. Are they really that super? Well, sometimes. But what about the Sega Genesis? I bet there's some Super games on that, and turns out there's about 10 of them. How are you feeling? You got John Riggs here, checking out the Super games on the Sega Genesis. Starting off with Super Baseball 2020, the future year of 2020, where Super Baseball is now played by robots. Everything is electrical, everything's made out of metal. You got just the grid of the grounds and how things are played, and everything's robotic. It has to be in the future because everything's made out of metal and everything's robotic. Here's the deal though. It's actually a pretty decent baseball game. If you're looking for a pretty decent baseball game for the Sega Genesis, Super Baseball 2020 ain't that bad. It really isn't. Now, you're not playing as like the licensed teams or anything like that. Of course you're not. Because in the future, all the licensed teams are robots. Well, it says baseball with a twist. There's tons of baseball games out there. The Sega Genesis has several of them itself. But Super Baseball 2020, even though it has the robotic vibe and the kind of overdone, okay, everything's made out of metal, everything's, you know, with grids and stuff like that, it's actually still a pretty decent baseball game. It might be worth checking out. I don't know, I have fun with this one. Super Battleship, available for the Sega Genesis. This one was on our Super Nintendo video as well. And I loved Battleship, the board game. It was one of my favorites, where you had to like set up your ships and everything like that. You take turns, you know, like kind of lobbing your missiles or lobbing your torpedoes or whatever to hopefully hit them, and they might hit you and whatever. I don't know, I'm a big fan of the board game version of Super Battleship, and what they did is they turned that into an actual video game. Now here's the thing, when I played this game, I don't care about the actual Super Battleship part of it. I just want to play the video board game version of it, which is available and done really well. And this one here, you're kind of like, you know, you do 3 at a time instead of just 1 at a time, which is kind of nice. And still classic Battleship. If it, you know, doesn't leave a mark, don't have to worry about it. If it does leave a mark, well, it means that you hit one of the boats, and now you have to, you know, kind of blow your way around that area. Okay, well, if I hit that one, you know ships are going to be either long or wide, you know, up and down or left or right, and then you just have to, you know, keep blasting at them until they finally, you know, sink their battleship. Very neat. Taking it all the way back with a classic Super Hang-On. Now, Hang-On, huge in the arcade. You actually had the motorcycle controller to sit on and kind of move left and right and everything. I thought that was super cool. And then Super Hang-On is the Sega Genesis version of your Hang-On game, where look how big your motorcycle is compared to the rest of the road. You're like gigantic on this game, but that's all right. It was kind of nice because so many racing games at the time where you were in a car. Like you were in a car, you were in a sports car, you were in a futuristic car, you were in a, you know, whatever it was. But not a whole lot of motorcycle games. So thanks to Hang-On, yeah, which I thought was a great name for a game because I feel like I'm literally hanging on. Scared to ride this motorcycle. It gives you that racing game element, like an Outrun or something, but instead of it just being, you know, a cruising drive, you're in a motorcycle, which is pretty cool. And Super Hang-On, an absolute classic for the Sega Genesis. Another sports game to add to the list, Super High Impact. Super High Impact. This one, not really licensed teams. You can play as certain cities. Seattle is not on here, so that's bad news for me. Or maybe it's good news, considering when this game came out and how the Seahawks were doing at the time. But with Super High Impact, it's the football game that goes kind of left and right, a lot like a Tecmo Bowl. So if you like that Tecmo Bowl stance, if you like that Tecmo Bowl view, where so many other football games kind of go, you know, north to south, this gives you that sideways view, which is kind of fun. And again, you have your plays, and you have, you know, try to just win the game here. It's football. It's a fun one. Super high impact. One thing that this game has that I love, that I don't see a whole lot in this game, because admittedly I don't play this game a whole lot, but sometimes if you like really tackle them and really knock them down, you'll actually make their clothes explode. That's kind of fun. Super Hydlide, good lord. Hydlide for the NES was a rough experience for those who grew up playing the NES games. I have a couple of friends who actually really like it because that was their nostalgic memory behind it. And Super Hydlide, more of that. Maybe a little bit more of a different experience where you could actually hit the attack button, where before you just kind of had to like switch between shield or attack and kind of crash into them. Yeah, I'm not going to last too long in this game here. I'm just going to show you a little bit of this, just the beginning part if you're not super familiar with Super Hydlide. But apparently the Hydlide series was popular enough to make a few of them, because we had these ones, and then we also had, you know, had the NES one, the Genesis one. There was that one for the Sega Saturn. That's hilarious. This could be fun. Like, I could see how this would be a kind of game that I would have really enjoyed back then, and I didn't play this game back then either. I didn't have this game, never rented it or anything. Super Monaco GP. Here's another racing game for you. This is from the Monaco series, and these can be pretty fun. Like this style of race, like the Le Mans or the whatever, where you have like your preliminary race, like just to go around the track to find out kind of where you place on the track, and then you go through and do the actual race. Super Monaco GP. It's another racing game. And look at that, you even got a little rear view camera up in the corner there. Little rear view mirror, how fun. Super Smash TV, this is one that also came out for the Super Nintendo. Smash TV was also on the NES. Great in the arcade. In the arcade, it is a twin-stick shooter, and on the Super Nintendo it kind of does a little bit of that too. Can't do that on the Sega Genesis, but what they did, I think, worked really well for the Sega Genesis. I think it worked very, very well for the Sega Genesis with the 3 buttons, because you have one that basically just shoots in the direction you're facing. There's just a horde of enemies, or a horde of, I just call them enemies. A horde of enemies that come at you from the different doors. You just have to blast them all, before they get you. Perfect. Super Smash TV. Heavily inspired by, not Demolition Man, what was that movie? Running Man. There we go. Heavily inspired by Running Man. It's a movie I haven't seen in a long, long time. So with your 3-button Sega Genesis controller, if you've never played this version of Super Smash TV, one button fires in the direction you're facing. Nice and easy, nice and simple. The other button locks you in, so you're always firing that direction, but then you can move around. So you can always fire to the left, let's say, and then move. It doesn't matter which direction you're moving, you're still firing to the left, because that's where all the enemies are coming from. And then your third button, which I thought was really interesting, shoots in the opposite direction that you're facing. So if you're walking away, and because the enemies are coming towards you, you're shooting behind you, which I thought was really brilliant. Because like you're walking away from them, but then you're shooting behind yourself to avoid the enemies that are just charging up on you. I think it's a great way to play this game. Super Street Fighter 2, the new challengers. This is when you take Street Fighter 2 and add a few new players. Oh, the days before DLC. I know there are people who are reminiscent on the, there used to be, you buy a game and it was already done. You didn't have any DLC. It's like, yeah, I remember those days. It was called Street Fighter 2. You had to buy Street Fighter 2, then Street Fighter 2 Turbo, then Super Street Fighter 2. You had to just buy a new game every year. And this one adds the new characters. Cammy introduced finally to this setup here. I always like to DJ. I'm going to play as a T-Hawk here. And for the Sega Genesis, it plays so well. It is such a good game for the Sega Genesis. Unfortunately, during this time, many people still did not have a 6-button controller. So if you didn't, and the 6-button controller for the Sega Genesis is one of my favorite 6-button controllers. If you did not have that 6-button controller, you had weak, medium, and strong punch. And then when you hit the start button, it goes to weak, medium, strong kick. So as you're playing this game, you're constantly hitting the start button to switch back between punches and kicks. So you have to figure that out for yourself, or just never punch or never kick. And just always have just weak, medium, strong, and you figure it out. You just sit there and throw fireballs, but you just won't do your weird, cyclone kick or something, if you're playing as like Ryu or Ken. Super Street Fighter 2, absolutely fantastic for the Sega Genesis, I think. Super Thunderblade could have been better. I like the idea of, kind of a helicopter-based shooting game. And the fact that it's 3D-ish, where you get that Sega scaling, where things are moving towards you, but they're just, kind of getting, there's more and more of them, and they're kind of getting bigger and bigger. Unfortunately, you're always in the sight of the things shooting at you, so it's hard to see what shot you until you get shot. So you just have to keep moving all the time. You can never stay in the same place for more than a millisecond, because that's right where they're going to shoot at you, and you have to keep moving around. This game's really rough. Super Thunderblade, great in the arcade. I love there's several Thunderblade games, but Super Thunderblade on the Sega Genesis, you may not last too long on a game like this. Simple enough. Super Volleyball, as if volleyball wasn't super enough, we have Super Volleyball. This is kind of a, in a way, side view 4-on-4, because you have the 3 up at the net and then the 1 serving, which is pretty interesting. Now, volleyball is all about that bump set spike, as you get that, and then you can, lob the ball over the net. Now, with this side view, it plays interesting. Admittedly, I'm capturing my own footage here, as you can clearly see, because you can tell how well I'm not doing. This is the very first time I've ever played this game. So I was like, oh, you know what, I'll play it for a little bit and capture footage, and that way I can talk about Super Volleyball. I'm used to the more beach volleyball games, like the Kings of the Beach, or the Super Spike B-Ball for the NES. Volleyball for the NES, which was the 6-on-6, that kind of like high school gym-style volleyball game. But I never thought about playing a volleyball game like this, and the more I played it, and I didn't capture too much footage for this, the more I played this, it's actually a pretty fun game. I actually might go back through and play it some more later. I say might, because no guarantees there, but I ended up enjoying myself playing Super Volleyball, this style of volleyball game, because I've never really played a volleyball game that looked like this and played like this. So this is new to me. See, I'm still discovering new games myself. Superman, not really a part of this list. I'm going to add it to the list anyway just because it does contain the word super at the beginning of the game, so it's not really what I had in mind, but Superman from Sunsoft for the Sega Genesis, it's an okay Superman game. And also not added to the list is Super WrestleMania because it's listed as WWF Super WrestleMania. It's not Super WWF WrestleMania or anything like that, so it starts with WWF, not going to add it, but, you know, you might say, oh, well, whatever happened to that one? Well, I understand, and I know where you're coming from, but it's not on the list because it's called WWF Super WrestleMania. So there you go. I also sell custom air fresheners like this one that smells like cherry pie and damn fine coffee. Or this one that smells like a brand new video game. That's like styrofoam and static. Those custom air fresheners and the video games I make available in my shop. Check out the link in the description below. Thank you much.